Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher and this is Presidential Chronicles, the series of books and videos on American history as seen through the lives of the presidents of the United States. This episode is from the life of Martin Van Buren, and the focus is number 2 to number 1. The year is 1832 and Van Buren has been serving as a recess appointment as the minister to the court of St. James in Great Britain. But his nomination from President Andrew Jackson to the Senate was ultimately rejected by that body, and so now he was out, but it actually spurred Jackson to wanting Van Buren all the more as his number 2, his vice president in his re-election campaign. Now, things had changed a bit in terms of how parties were getting together to nominate people for these top positions. It was clear that Jackson was obviously going to be renominated to be the president of the United States, but the Democrats met in convention. It's a new construct. Delegates from across the country came together to Baltimore to put Jackson at the top of the ticket, but mostly in this case to pick a vice president. And they all knew that Jackson wanted Van Buren. So they actually put in a rule to try to help this out. It was called the 2/3 rule. And that meant you needed 2/3 of the votes to get the nomination. They were a little worried that somebody might squeak in with a bare majority on the first ballot, surprise them, and keep Van Buren off the ballot. Well, it turned out to work out just fine. On the first ballot, Van Buren got 70% of the vote. He was the nominee for vice president. Jackson easily beat Henry Clay in the fall canvass, and Jackson is reelected, and Van Buren takes his seat as the vice president. It was clearly a controversial presidency for Andrew Jackson. His first term, his second term, both were controversial, but he had a senior advisor who was aligned with him every step of the way in his vice president, Martin Van Buren. This was unusual, not only at this stage in American history, but for the first 150 or so years of American presidential history, vice presidents had almost no role in their presidential administrations. They were mostly thought of their other constitutional duty, which was to serve as the president of the Senate. Like they were more part of the legislative branch than they were in the executive branch. But Jackson and Van Buren, complete exception. Van Buren was his most closest senior advisor on almost every topic, which was probably a good thing since they were completely aligned. It didn't matter the controversy. The veto over recharting the Bank of the United States in that first term, Van Buren had been on board. Remove the federal funds from the bank, Van Buren on board. The Specie Circular, the Indian Removal Act, other controversial topics, Van Buren was on board every step of the way. Now, presidents to this stage had never handpicked their successor, although, Thomas Jefferson clearly was partial to James Madison to follow in his place, but mostly presidents on the way out kind of stayed out of it and let others decide who would follow them. But not with Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren. Jackson made it clear he wanted Van Buren to be his successor. And the reasons aren't that complicated. Sure, it could have been because he liked him. It could have been because he thought he owed him something. When Van Buren had started as the catalyst for the purge of the cabinet in the first term, he certainly appreciated that act. But mostly it's because he knew that Van Buren would continue his policies. This would be another 4 years, ostensibly, another 4 years of a Jackson administration, just with a new man in charge with Martin Van Buren. And this was given from Van Buren's own lips when he said at the time of his nomination, "I content myself on this occasion with saying that I consider myself the honored instrument selected by the friends of the present administration to carry out its principles and policy. I shall have honored with the choice of the American people endeavor to tread generally in the footsteps of President Jackson, happy if I shall be able to perfect the work which he has so gloriously begun." Probably music to the ears of Andrew Jackson. Well, from that moment going forward, Van Buren stayed largely quiet during the campaign. He took his own advice that he had given Jackson 8 years before. There's not much good that can come from the voice of candidates during campaigns. It's usually bad. Your words are twisted, taken out of context, so don't say anything. And that's largely what Van Buren did. He didn't complete his correspondence, was continuing, mainly echoing the fact that he was going to continue the Jackson policies. But there was one issue that he couldn't remain silent on, and that was the topic of slavery. That topic had kind of been put in the back burner with the Missouri Compromise back in 1820, but there was a new wrinkle: Texas. Texas had just declared its independence from Mexico, And there was a lot of discussion about Texas eventually becoming part of the United States. The Missouri Compromise only covered the Louisiana Territory, so potentially this could be a new wrinkle, and the people in the South who were very concerned about the long-term nature of their peculiar institution, that they called it, of slavery, they wanted to be able to expand, and they certainly wanted Texas to be part of that expansion in the long term. So in the end, where did Martin Van Buren sit on this topic of slavery? And so he broke his silence on this one topic and basically told the South exactly what they wanted to hear. According to Van Buren during the campaign, slavery is, in my judgment, exclusively under the control of the state governments. And I am not apprised, nor do I believe that a contrary opinion to any extent deserving consideration is entertained in any part of the United States. I do not see on what authority the general government could interfere without a change of the Constitution. Nothing to worry about here. The Southerners were appeased by this, and now you had a very united Democratic Party, North and South, to rally around Jackson's handpicked successor, Martin Van Buren. Well, what about the opposition? There was indeed some political realignments going on in the United States, and a formal opposition in the form of the Whig Party had come together behind Henry Clay and what he had called his American system. This was a set of policies that would promote American interests. It included high protective tariffs. It included federally funded internal improvements. It included an active engagement by the federal government on behalf of citizens. This was very different from the Jacksonian and Van Buren perspective, and you had two very distinct positions in vying for the presidency. What you didn't have were two distinct candidates. Van Buren was the only choice from the Democratic side, but the Whigs couldn't unify around a single candidate. Clay had lost the previous election, so he was not considered for this turn. There were four others who were really in the running. William Henry Harrison of Ohio, Hugh White of Tennessee, Daniel Webster of Massachusetts, and Willie Magnum of North Carolina were all vying for the spot. The campaign did get ugly at times as the Whigs really tried to divide the Democrats, to convince them that Van Buren was not what they thought he was in terms of being the second coming of Andrew Jackson. And one of the people who took the bull by the horns on this one was none other than the frontiersman and former Congressman Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett wrote a book, a biography of Martin Van Buren that basically ripped him from cover to cover. One of the choicest lines from Crockett's book was this: Van Buren is as opposite to General Jackson as dung is to a diamond. He is what the English call a dandy. When he enters the Senate chamber in the morning, he struts and swaggers like a crow in the gutter. He is laced up in corsets such as women in town wear, and if possible, tighter than the best of them. It would be difficult to say from his personal appearance whether he was man or woman, but for his large red and gray whiskers. These were the words from Davy Crockett about Martin Van Buren. In the end, it didn't matter because the Whigs were divided and the Democrats, who had the majority across the country anyway, were aligned, and it turned into a nice victory for Martin Van Buren. In the Electoral College, 170 votes to 124 for the others combined. 15 states went for Van Buren. Again, combined, 11 states went for the other four. Van Buren won a majority of the popular vote at 51%. He was ready to go from number 2 to number 1, the great magician ready to become the 8th president of the United States. It would not be an easy ride. That's the story for another day. That is Martin Van Buren, and number 2 to number 1 from the life of Martin Van Buren. For more presidential chronicles, check out my books on Amazon.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles.